Nikola Jokic is the MVP once again. This is Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day and part of your week. Really appreciate it. We're free and available on all platforms when you make us your first listen. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. My name's Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network, joined by my co-host and colleague and friend, Adam Mares, at Adam_Mares on Twitter for all of his great takes and work. Adam, how are the birds this Monday morning?
Man, I told you I saw the yellow-rumped warbler the other day. Saw the yellow warbler today out on my morning scoot. It was great. So birds are going great, man.
Good to hear. You know who is also doing great, Nuggets fans, as Nikola Jokic, first reported by Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN, then confirmed by Mike Singer of the Denver Post. And I'm sure that if I reached out, I could confirm it, but I don't really see the point. Nikola Jokic has won his, and you could too. Nikola Jokic has won his second consecutive Most Valuable Player award. So regardless of all of the conversation about it, and you and I have talked a lot about what this award means because we knew he was going to win it for some time. It's a great award. It's a great accomplishment for the franchise. It's a great accomplishment for Jokic, regardless of how much he cares about it to whatever degree that he does. It cements him as, I don't know, I thought he was already the best Nugget of all time. This really puts it beyond any sort of conversation, regardless of what folks are going to say about Carmelo. Do you have any further takes on Nikola Jokic winning the second MVP? And congrats to him and the Denver Nuggets.
I mean, I don't really have anything new. We've talked about this for 8 months. But, you know, the thing is, the bottom line of it all is that Jokic, with this award now, it will matter most when his career is all said and done. And I don't like the legacy stuff. I feel like the NBA is too much about legacy. One of the reasons that the MVP conversation is so toxic is we start talking about players as legacy before they ever reach their prime. And I think it harms the way we view these people. I learned this lesson with LeBron. I mean, obviously following his career, I remember in 2009 when he lost and was out the door in 2010. And I remember thinking what's his legacy? What does it mean? Little did we know his best decade was actually ahead of him. Decade. Yes. The entire 10-year run. So I don't like talking about these things too much in real time, but when it's all said and done, when the career is over, having 2 MVPs is going to frame a lot of when we talk about how good was this guy. It's going to help frame a lot of it. I think both of them are well-deserved last year and this year. So that's all I think about with this is we'll think about it 10 years from now when we look back on Jokic.
How do we make it to where you don't mind this conversation next year? Because I love talking about it, and it hurts me badly that you hate talking about it so much. Is there any way that we could do it to where it would be okay?
I honestly don't think we can, man. And it's not like any one person. Some of this is just, it's funny. I sometimes think about this. I'm going to take you on an adventure here, Matt. I sometimes think about if aliens were to land on Earth and say, we have got a power source for you that nuclear fission. Here's how it works. We got it for you. Our nuclear fusion. Here's how it works. We would totally just turn it into weapons and kill each other with it. And the reason I know this is we have the internet. We have this great thing that's we could use it for anything. And it's no, we're just going to use it to argue about the MVP all year. So to me, no, there's not. I don't think there's a way to make that conversation toxic, not because any individual, but because of all individuals collectively naturally will have to form this conversation into its worst way. So no, but I do have a question for you. I don't think you can win it next year. The things that would have to happen for him to win it would be so absurd. But let's throw him out for a second. Let's say he's not eligible for whatever reason to win it next year. Do you think there's a chance that next year's MVP will not be contentious?
There's a chance.
What would it look like?
I don't want this to happen. Luka gets hurt. The Sixers win the 1 seed. So Harden in 2018, there wasn't you have these seasons where it's oh yeah, it's this guy. That's the guy. right?
I know, but it's like when we look at the last couple is where I feel like it's most Giannis, Jokic. Those last three have all just been so contentious.
Giannis 2020 was rough because of Houston fans, which you can kind of proxy them for Sixers fans. Like, this is what I'm basically telling you is like, if the Sixers fans don't win, that's going to be toxic. Like, I don't know what else to say about this. Like, I deal with every fan base on the internet. Like, I deal with all of them. There are tiers. There are tiers of how bad it is. Everyone kind of knows the six. Like, this is no surprise. We know about Philly fans.
Yeah.
Like, we just do. And that's fine. That they're proud of that identity. But like, they're up there. They're not the only one, but they're up there. And so like, it will continue to be pretty toxic if Joel doesn't win next year. Like, here's how, if you're like, will it be as, if you ask, because before the episode, you were like, I'm going to ask you, if it will be as toxic as this year. And my answer is, if it's Luka versus Embiid, which is a pretty reasonable idea of what the race could look like, yeah, it's going to be as bad. It's going to be Dallas and Philadelphia going back and forth. That's two with, you've got, like, there's a lot of this. So yeah, like, it is going to be that toxic. Like, it probably is. You asked, like, is there any way it won't be? And the answer is like, yeah, like, if there's one guy, because there are a certain number of years, like, yeah, the last three have been really bad, but there was Harden.
But this is the league. So here's my broader point. The league from the last 30 years, most of it has featured the best player, like a best player, Michael Jordan, LeBron James. We don't have that right now. Giannis is the closest thing we have to it. And maybe it's Giannis. Like, he's the only guy I could see winning it where it's like, we're not arguing it because maybe he wins a title this year and next year we're like, yes, we know he's the best player and he had the best regular season. No argument. But I just think going forward, you're going to have Luka, you're going to have Tatum, you're going to have Jokic again and Embiid again and Giannis. You're going to have a lot of good players. There's not one guy that is head and shoulders above everyone.
No, but if you win, I'll put it this way. One of the things that caused this was that none of those guys had the record above 60.
Right.
Like,
yeah, that's a good point. That's a great point.
If Embiid had his numbers for a 60-win team,
it's true. Yep.
I have to say he's like, by my definition, because the net rating would bear out in that. It's impossible for you to have like a comparable one, right?
And next year they might, but the Nuggets might also.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, I mean, that's the thing. But there's a lot of things that we can talk about with his chances of winning again. We'll do that in the offseason. We're in the offseason. We'll do that later.
Part of me hopes that every narrative from this year just flips next year and Embiid is winning the analytics and the team has the better record. It's just like, we have to flip every argument and be like, hold on.
Yeah. So there's a chance for it, but like the most likely, like, yeah, I think that I will say this, like, look, the 2017 conversation around that one was pretty brutal, but like, look, for me, I will just tell you, I think this year was exceptional, and it was because of one particular fan base. Bucks fans weren't toxic. Nuggets fans, I think, got toxic in response.
Yeah.
Right? Some folks.
There's no question that there is a corner of Jokic fans, a large corner of it that like enjoys this debate every single day. Single day we're at it. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, look, I care about it this is the problem with me covering Denver and hosting a Locked On Nuggets is like, that was once I saw this coming, I was like, oh God, this is going to be a real, like, and I enjoyed this one less than I ever have. Like, I love this. Like, I love the idea of trying to parse out great seasons between them and celebrating all of them. Like, I wrote the case for Embiid, and like, I learned stuff about Joel. I learned about some of the stuff that he's like better at than I thought. Like, I learned a lot about it, and that process is really rewarding for me. But it just, because of, again, just one side can't really deal with it, it got really bad. Now, it could be, again, there's a lot of these. Like, there are other fan bases, but for me, I think that was a conversation.
I also think that Jokic and Embiid in particular were just such facsimiles for other arguments. So it wasn't just Philly versus Denver. There was analytics versus eye test. There was overpowering versus outsmarting. Like, there was just it created a perfect dichotomy that created the worst conversations. But I fear next year maybe it's going to be Luka. I mean, look, Suns right now 2-2 in a series. Like,
yeah, it's interesting.
If Mavs win this, even if they don't win the title, if the Mavs win this series and unseat the Phoenix Suns somehow, no matter what happens from that point, Luka's credentials are going to go up. Again, I'm not saying it should, because I agree. It should be from game 1 to game 82 and nothing else. but we know there's this baggage that gets carried into this. And I think that Jokic's profile gets elevated if they somehow pull off the series or even just take it to 7. And then if you talk about a Mavs team being a top 3 seed next year, he's going to be in this conversation. So I just see a lot of avenues towards this conversation going the exact same way for the foreseeable future. And I'm not looking forward to it. But I think Jokic, in a weird way, Jokic is probably eliminated from contention in a way that I can just sit out.
Yeah, you can just be cool with it. Yeah. So congrats to Joker. Congrats to the organization. Congrats to his teammates who did help him get there, regardless of everything else. Like, they don't win enough games, and he's not going to win. Like, if they're not over 500, if they don't make it out of the playoffs.
That's true.
So
he won the exact amount of games required to win the MVP.
That is accurate. He won the exact amount that he needed to. That is accurate. Any fewer, and he does not win the MVP. So congrats to him. Congrats to Nuggets fans who really cared about it. So good for them. Good for everyone. There's some positivity for you on a Monday along with some bird talk. Let's take a break. We'll come back. I want to talk about Malone, and I have some thoughts on Malone that I've been thinking about that I want to bring up with you. And we'll do that when we come back. I'm talking about his offseason priorities when we come back on Locked On Nuggets. But first, I need to tell you about BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and Major League Baseball over at BetOnline. I had a rough weekend. I had a bad weekend. Don't bet on road favorites. Adam, don't do that. That's not a thing you should do that I did. It was bad. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information from live betting, playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for making us part of your day and your first listen each and every day. Make sure to check out the Locked On NBA Big Board. Host Rafael Barlow from the NBA Draft Junkies and author of the NBA Big Board newsletter is joined by Richard Stamen, Sam Ferris, and Leif Thulin, giving fans an in-depth look into the NBA draft, mock draft, player rankings, and of course, big boards. A lot of choices in front of the Nuggets this season. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. So, Adam, Michael Malone in his season-ending press conference. I thought set the right tone, and I've talking to some Nuggets fans and various commentators and stuff. I've kind of gotten that same sense, which is like he said what they wanted to hear, which is he said, "We've got to be better. The players have to be better. The front office has to be better. I have to be better." Like there was not an ignorance of what next year represents. Like Malone was not as much as he was dampening the expectations for Jamal and MPJ, which is a credit to him for not trying to limit that. He is not doing it for the entire season. Like it's very apparent, like next year is title or bust. Like that's the approach, is got to win the title, not make the finals, not make conference finals. It's you got to the goal is to win the title. I think it was that this year until they got halfway through and it was I don't think we're going to be able to make it. Right.
I don't know if that was the goal this year, to be honest.
Okay. No, I'm not dismissing you. That's completely fair to that's a completely fair perspective. I was just, if so, I was just wrong about it. That wasn't the sense that I got from anything.
We thought that Murray might come back, and we thought Porter, would be healthy, so or might even return. But when that was clear, it wasn't going to happen. I just
maybe by November when they had the worst.
I don't think there was a huddle. We're not going for the title this year. It just was, I think everybody was kind of we know what this is. Let me say, this is what I feel like with Malone's presser, though. You ever on a diet, and then maybe you have to do a road trip, get kids' softball game, or so you have to be out of town, and there's no choice. Despite your best efforts, the only thing you could eat was Taco Bell or something. Something happened to where you had to break the diet because of this or that. And the weekend, kind of goes awry, and you get back into town, and it's all right, I have to get back on the diet, hard, strict. I got to get up at 6. I got to go do my workout. I got to make my eggs because I'm, whatever. To me, this is what Michael Malone's speech was. They just had the weekend where they couldn't help it. They had to have different expectations, but it was, hey, just so it's clear, that part is over. We have to create this very definitive line to we are back on the diet, meaning we are back on the path towards winning the title, and that window is wide open right now. So to me, that's the best way I could sort of, create an analogy for it.
Yeah, I think, and so a lot of that is I've talked to Malone enough to know that he's pretty self-examinative. Examinative. like he's not I think there are coaches that genuinely just go play golf all summer. Like I know there are.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Especially like coaches that they tend to be former players, to be perfectly honest with you.
Interesting.
And I think Malone is one that really digs in and goes like, okay, how do we do? What did we get wrong? And we've seen that in that he's very rarely made the same mistakes year over year. Now, I will say this season, I thought he actually went back to some things that he had eliminated. Do you remember like 2016 and 17, where he would play the bench like 18 minutes to end games, and we were like, you can't do that, right? He did that again this year. Like there were times when he did that because he was so frustrated and at the end of his wits with everything. I do think a lot of Malone's success is going to be dictated for him personally on getting him back into the right mindset. Like he needs this long off season. He needs to reset and get himself primed for it. It has felt like he was putting out fires since the bubble. Like that's to me is like what I think he's been in is basically like crisis management mode as a coach. And that's a really difficult situation. And there are coaches that have done incredible jobs with it, but it's also hard to have like a phenomenal season when you're up against that much. You get rewarded for it, like Ty Lue, right? Like Ty Lue without his two guest guys this year, everybody's like, oh my God, look what an incredible coach. I think Malone did not do that this year. And so for him, it's going to be about, I do think that he's better, and this has kind of been proven over the course of his tenure. He's better when he knows who he can rely on and he's not trying to find answers in the roster. Like using certain guys certain ways, yes. Getting guys to like become something and like making units just become greater than the whole, I think is a challenge for him. We've talked about it that we think, now look, a lot of this is like Malone's not going to give a about what we think, but like you and I are both of the mindset that probably the assistant staff has got to shift a little bit, right?
I think so.
We both kind of said that there's probably needs to be more innovation. One thing I did want to talk to you about is Jordy took over as defensive coordinator, right? And they play a lot more drop this season. I don't know how to parse that versus like the exhaustive aspect of Jokic having to handle as much of a usage load as he did. Because there has been like an honest conversation about, like Jokic is tired. It's hard for him to play at the level. To me, they need to get back to that. Like that on the defensive side, there needs to be improvement on the roster as far as rim protection goes. There needs to be better defenders in terms of containment. But from a systemic standpoint, I feel they're at their best when they're attacking pick and roll, like at the level. Do you feel like that needs to be part of the conversation, at least in the offseason?
I think Cal talked about this in his exit interview about how Jokic had to do so much that if you'd watch over the course of the game, third, fourth quarter, you could see like him on the defensive end wear down. And I think a lot of it has to do with that. I mean, some of this is if you can score in ways that don't require Jokic to do everything and use so much more energy, hopefully you have him fresher for the fourth quarter on both ends of the court to be more of a two-way player. So I think part of it's that. With regards to drop versus playing up, what I don't think any of this stuff, I mean, there's details about Denver, their defense that, can change or improve or whatever. But to me, what it really comes down to is the execution. Like Denver this year, for whatever reason, and probably that reason was they were so shorthanded for most of the season and didn't have the personnel. But to me, it was less about what was the scheme and it was how locked in are they, how well do they execute that scheme? And that's why when you got into the playoffs, games 1 and 2, wide open backdoor cuts, wide open three-pointers, failed switches, failed handoffs on the weak side, whatever it was. To me, that's the difference in the NBA at the NBA level, more so than scheme. It's how well does a team understand their responsibilities and how few mistakes do they make on that end. And it's hard for us to know, like Jordy Fernandez was the defensive, unofficial defensive coordinator this year. It's hard for us to know what kind of job he did on that. All we can look at is what the team did. And to me, it's more about is the team being held accountable, both from the coaching staff, the defensive coordinator, but also from each other, so that when you get into January, you're polished enough that you're not making those kinds of mistakes and you're giving yourself the best chance. So to me, we could talk about scheme, but it has more to do with that part of it.
Okay, we can disagree, but I'm asking you, like, do you understand why this is a thing that I think matters? Like, I get that you're like really focused on the execution of it, but like I do think that using the personnel the right way is important in terms
Sometimes drop is the right way, though, even with the personnel that you have. It just depends on your matchup. And I think all teams have to be able to execute all schemes. I mean, even your best defenses in this playoffs have had to go away from their bread and butter.
I agree, but I also think like there's certain schemes you're never going to be able to run. Like you can't put Jokic and switch. You just can't.
I think you can. Against the against a backcourt that their worst option is to ISO their backcourt players. Sure.
Okay.
Same with zone. Same with like any of this stuff is bad overarching. But if you can like force bad offensive players to go ISO, like can Jokic switch against Josh Giddey?
Yeah, I don't know. It depends on what Giddey does in terms of his development this season.
This year, if you switched against Josh Giddey, you can give him 6 feet of space and say, you know what, this is probably their worst offensive option.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Okay, what do you think the offseason changes need to be for or
You're
priorities?
upset about my answer here, Matt, but it's important to how I see the game. This is not like we talk a lot about the drop versus the show or the hedge or this.
I know. Like, go ahead. But your central point is
that execution is so much more important than scheme to me.
Okay. I've seen a lot of teams that don't have the personnel that, like, to me, it's hand in hand. I think there's certain things that you can't expect players to execute if they're not tailored to it. So that's where I get to is like, I just think that I think there are very few players that can execute all schemes effectively, even if you coach them up, even if you get the right guys. Like, I just think that everybody's kind of got weaknesses. I think everybody's got stuff that they don't do well. And I think that's part and parcel to like solving all these problems that kind of arise throughout the course of the season. What do you think is, we've talked about innovation a lot. Is that to you the biggest offseason priority for this coaching staff?
Man, that's an interesting one. When I think of innovation, I'm thinking primarily on the offensive end of the court.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I mean is that where you think the most focus needs to be?
We have not seen Michael Porter fully integrated into this offense, in large part because I just think there's like a process of, all right, your first 100 games is this, your next 100 games are this, then your 100 games after that are that. But to me, the Denver doesn't have time for the full like Michael Porter ramp up to be integrated the way Jamal Murray and Nikola have really worked out. So speeding up that process, I think, is going to be really big. And that's a tough one because how much is he going to play next year? But to maximize their title window, you have to get the most out of his offensive skill set and defensive skill set, but offensive skill set. And honestly, I don't know how to do that. I don't know the right answer to that. It's a complicated one, but I have to imagine a lot of brain power has to be put there.
How good does the offense need to be? That's a
top 2 or 3. No, I honestly believe you can ask it. How good does the offense have to be? Because I don't think Denver's going to be a top 3 or 4 or 5 defense. I think they can be a top 10 defense, but I don't think they can be better than that. And if you're a top 10 defense, you can't be the 7 offense. You got to be one or 2, maybe 3. You have to be undeniable. You have to be able to like, there isn't a fix for you. Teams are just going to force you into your weakest option, which is still really good.
Which is funny because like Utah was the number 1 offense this season. They're like the most solvable team in the league.
Right.
I always kind of think that's a good explanation of things. But like, they've got to be like, I agree, like they got to be top 3 and then also like not have a key weakness that
not solvable.
Yeah, that is very apparent in a postseason environment.
I think Jokic naturally is a more unsolvable player than most. I think it's part of what makes him so special. Is that you can post him, you can play him up top, you can spot him up, you can bring him off ball.
His last 3 games versus Draymond, I think, are honestly proof of that. So,
but now you have to. The Michael Porter piece is the one. Like you can't have Michael Porter be solvable. Right now, I think he's extremely solvable. So it's figuring out ways to use him while he also develops into a more well-rounded player.
Malone has made a big deal, and he talked about this. One of the things that I think that caused this entire season to derail, on top of the injuries, was Malone has talked about like how important he thinks it is to get off to good starts. And he's looked at the numbers. Like if you're, I forget what he said, but he's like, if you're X record by Christmas, you're pretty much guaranteed to make the playoffs.
Right.
Those types of things.
Was it 12-8? It was like not that impressive of a number. He said 10-8 or 12-8, something like that. I think 12.
Yeah. And so it's like, it's trying to get to that number to get him off to a good start and he's done this traditionally. And this has always been like, this to me has been a repeating pattern over the last couple of years, even going back to the 2020-21 season, right? Going into the bubble. Like the concept of how much he always wants to start fast and then they don't.
Right.
And then he feels like he's trying to play catch up and it puts more pressure and stress. And like everyone's done with me making excuses for Will. And I get that. And I've talked a lot about how I think those early minutes have a cost on Barton. I'm to the point of, we talked about Barton in the episodes before if you want to hear about why we both kind of agree it's probably time for him to move on. But yeah, my question here is, does Malone need to be a little bit more chill going into this season, or does he need to, do you think that they need to start, how important, what's the priority level for them getting off to that 20-8 start, 12-8?
I think it's a huge priority in large part for the reason you're kind of hinting at here. And that is Michael Malone, I think, will be a better coach as a front runner. Meaning if you give him if you're the 1 seed through 20 games and it's like, okay, playoffs are a lock, top 4 seed is very likely because you got off to a, 14-6 start, something great like that. I do think it buys you a lot of opportunity to work in a Bones, to work in a Zeke Naji, and to kind of do the things that prepare you. So much of the regular season is about preparing for the playoffs. This is what I'm talking about when I talk about versatility on defense. Of course, it's not going to be your go-to, what you do, but you do need reps at a lot of different things. So when the playoffs come, it's not the first time we see lineups, the first time we see defensive coverages, the first time we see plays. You want to be able to say like, hey, we've gone through all of these different things and we've figured out multiple ways to win. So to me, it actually is huge. It's crucial. But also, I kind of expect it. I think there's going to be enthusiasm from Jamal next year. More so than say, like, who do you think is going to be more enthusiastic in October, Jamal Murray or Devin Booker?
Jamal.
One guy's coming off of very long playoff runs and knows he's 8 months away from when the games really matter. And one guy's coming off of 18 months without playing. I just think he's going to have an enthusiasm and an energy, and you're going to need that to ride that wave. But yes, I think the first 20 games are going to be huge.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's Rayvon says here, I would much rather they focus on building better habits instead of early season wins. And I just think it's really tough to put Malone in a situation. If you're going to sit there and say like, this is the make or break year for your career, for your time with the Nuggets, like you got it, like this is it. We're going for the championship. You can't do that and then be like, yeah, but you really shouldn't care what your record is by Christmas. Like,
I think, I would disagree with her. I think you're disagreeing with him here. I almost feel like October, November, December are for stacking wins, and then January, February, March, April are for developing good habits. You should be doing both the entire time, but your hope is that you get off to enough of a cushion that you can kind of be like, I mean, especially after the All-Star break, you're supposed to be locking in on the defensive end. Maybe your offense suffers, but you lock in on that end so that when the playoffs arrive, everything's on a string.
All right, let's take a break. We'll come back and we'll talk about the playoffs and kind of what we're learning. We'll talk about some surprising series so far in the second round. We'll do that when we come back on Locked On Nuggets. But first, I want to tell you about Built Bar because it's delicious and incredible, and it's summer, and that means it's time to get out. I'm going up to Horsetooth Reservoir on the weekend. I'm going to try and do Horsetooth Falls with the kids. We'll see if my oldest is up for Horsetooth Rock, which he bailed on me halfway through last year. So we're going to try and get that up there. Get together, Archer. But to get them through, I'm of course going to have some Built Bars because they're just great snacks. My daughter always wants snacks, and that's why I always have a Built Bar ready for her. Got them in the backpacks, get them ready to go. As is the best. This is the best time of the year in Colorado. May, I was always gone because I was traveling for the playoffs, and I was home the last couple of years, and I was like, this is amazing. This is insane. May in Colorado is berserk. I'm sure it's very nice in Serbia as well. And the best part about Built Bars, they're healthy and delicious, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. If you haven't tried them, you got to try the Puffs, okay? Everyone's crazy for the Puffs. They come in crazy flavors like banana cream pie and churro. It's a marshmallow that's infused with protein. Could not be any better for you. You might want to get a mix box. It comes with 12 flavors of bars and Puffs. You got the Built Bars, which contain just 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, along with 17 grams of protein. Go to Built.com and get all your favorites like banana cream pie, raspberry, double chocolate, and so many more. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for making this part of your day and your first listen each and every day. Make your second listen Locked On NBA. I'm with you on Tuesday. We'll be recapping these games tonight as I weep over what the Grizzlies are probably going to have happen to them with Ja Morant out. And on Friday, you can check out Adam breaking down all the great games in the NBA playoffs as we look forward to the conference finals. Speaking of Adam Mares, so a couple of bunch of interesting series. I guess let's start with the one that you kind of mentioned earlier, the Dallas Mavericks. All of a sudden, 2-2 series. It's a best 2 out of 3 with Luka Doncic on the other side. I have my own thoughts on this series, but I'm dying to hear what you think of Phoenix versus Dallas.
Man, it's really interesting. This is actually an interesting question, actually, to me too. From my perspective, the number one reason why Dallas has gotten back into the series is less Luka. And I know that's crazy. They taking the ball out of his hands just enough to keep Phoenix honest. Obviously, some great shooting from the supporting cast, but I think these things go hand in hand. Dallas is too Luka dominant, and they were especially too Luka dominant in games 1 and 2. By giving Jalen Brunson, Spencer Dinwiddie a little bit more touches and a little bit more, hey, let's see what you got here. It broke. Phoenix had so overloaded on Luka that it got them some open shots. And then guys just, the whole supporting cast played better. So I think there's an important lesson here. Luka is incredible. Nobody can stop him. He was phenomenal in those first 2 games. But I think it became clear that that's exactly what Phoenix wanted, was for Luka to dominate as everybody else kind of gets frozen out. So to me, that's my perspective. I'm curious to see how Phoenix adjusts. And I tip my hat to Dallas team that I didn't all year. I've been saying I don't think they're that good, and they kept winning. So I tip my hat to them.
I gotta tell you, I'm in the middle of a rewatch right now, and my first impression is kind of proof. Phoenix just played terribly. I'm not trying to take anything away. It's just like Phoenix did so many things which are uncharacteristic for them.
First,
like,
there's no question about it. I mean, both 3 and 4.
They're helping out strong side from the corner on side pick and rolls to give up the corner 3. Like, of all the help that you would bring, that's the one. They screwed up switches. Chris Paul gets in foul trouble. Okay, that, whatever. It wasn't even like a shot variance thing. It wasn't that they shot badly or the Mavs shot great. Like, the Mavs obviously shot great in game 4. Like, that was an incredible shooting performance. But like, Phoenix just played so far below, and this does frustrate me in that it winds up being, I've been joking about this all through the playoffs, of I'm making like a Venn diagram, or a flow chart rather. I'm making a flow chart of how to determine whether an NBA coach is great. And it's, did you play zone? Yes, you're great. Did you play zone? No. Did your team win after losing? Yes. Great coach. Wonderful adjustments. For sure. That's like what a lot of this is about. And it's not that I don't think Dallas made adjustments, because they did. One of the things that they've done a lot is guard, pick and roll. They've run a lot more pick and roll with Luka, with Reggie Bullock as the screener.
Sure.
And that's really messed up Phoenix, because Phoenix is like, oh, because now it's kind of the same deal. Honestly, like, they're doing a little bit of what they did to him, to the Jazz, where it's like now Ayton is in that same spot where it's like, okay, he's got to stay home on Kleba, but you need some of that backline defense, especially because some of the defenders on Phoenix aren't as good as McHale and Crowder, etc. And so that's been like a really interesting thing. They've done a lot better job of sending help defensively to help out Luka, so he's not getting ripped to shreds by CP. Right. But I also just kind of look at this and I go, like, I just think Phoenix played really badly. I still very much expect Phoenix to win the series.
I do too. I mean, the one thing I'll say about Phoenix, and it's funny because I think we'll especially get it in the next round should Phoenix adjust. There's such a difference between a team being good all year, and there's such a difference between Phoenix never being in a series last year. I mean, every series was a breeze for them until the finals. And then seeing how they are when they're on their heels. They're not quite fully on their heels yet. It's 2-2. I think they're like concerned. But this is what you always want to see. It reminds me a little bit, Matt, of the Warriors in 2015 when they fell down 2-1 to the Grizzlies. They smacked everyone that year. 67 wins. They never were pressured. They got to the Grizzlies. They got down 2-1. And part of me thought, like, is this team going to crack under the pressure? Now, they responded and they won. I'm curious to see Phoenix. Like, it's just so different when you're clearly the ones who they're up 8 games in the win column all year long. You have no pressure to all of a sudden now you're 2-2 in a series. Again, I think they'll respond because I think they're the better team, and I agree with you. They still should have won at least one, if not both of those games in Dallas, despite everything. So I still think they win, but I'm curious to see if there's like a little fraying that happens with them.
Milwaukee is putting on one of the absolute best defensive postseasons I've seen since the mid-2000s. Their defense is ridiculous, just crowding and challenging physicality. Like, Boston was just taken aback by their physicality in Game 3. That was my big takeaway. Was like, there's all the conversation from the Boston fans about fouls and whatnot, despite the fact that Celtics doubled them up in free throws. And like, for me, a lot of it's just like, you're either made for this type of physicality or you're not. And I think Boston's having that moment where it's like moment of truth time. Like, are you going to be able to respond to how tough this is? Because Milwaukee, for a team that had really kind of obviously coasted in the regular season defensively, they have like with Giannis on court, Adam, they have a 93 defensive rating in 2022. That's for the playoffs. In this series, it's 96 versus the number 2 team in the league that was the best team in the league overall since January. It's an absurd defensive performance from the Milwaukee Bucks so far.
They're really good. I still, like, in my mind, think Boston's such a better team, and that's why that win is even more impressive. You're right, it was physical. They got gritty players over there. I don't know what else to say, man. That Milwaukee, I did not think would. I kind of thought the series would be a 6-game Boston series, and I guess it's still possible. But you're right, Milwaukee just like big brothered them.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. That's an excellent way to describe it. The Miami Heat have driven me absolutely insane. Just insane. You talk about like, I'm sorry, this is my opinion. This is just where I'm at. The Heat missed shots, just like a complete shot variance game. James Harden had himself a nice game, really nice.
That's the biggest development to me.
Joel Embiid had a really nice game, but despite all that, the Heat had their chances and they just couldn't knock down high quality looks. The Sixers defense, I don't think is good enough. I've trusted Miami too much. I have a lot of confidence in Miami. I'm one of the people that's higher on them than most. Yeah, I'm pretty high on Miami. I still think that the Heat are going to win this series, but boy, it was a bad time to get the kind of a shot performance in Game 4.
They need to make their threes. What are they, 14 of like 65 or something over their last 65 threes, something like that? Yeah, I mean, they got to make shots. I agree with you. You got a great close to the game from James Harden. You got good output from Joel Embiid. And still, I thought Miami should have gotten that game. So now the pressure is on the Max Struses of the world, the Tyler Heroes of the world in Game 5 when you go back home. Because now you can't afford another game where you shoot that poorly from the three-point line. Also, by the way, Jimmy Butler is making his shots. So everybody else needs to get in line.
Yeah, really crazy, especially considering that Jimmy's like pretty inconsistent game to game, but he's been great for them. And finally, Golden State Warriors, Ja Morant out for Game 4. Warriors are 10.5-point favorites in this game that we're going to do. That is
really
tonight. Yeah.
It's wild to me that Ja missed all those games. They're like 15-2 without Ja Morant, and then his injury causes this much of a. And I get it too. Like I see both sides of it, but 10.5 points.
Do you know how many of they were 20-8 straight up without Ja this season? Okay.
20-8?
Yeah.
He missed 28 games? Wow. I didn't realize it was that many.
Do you know how many of those they were road dogs for?
No.
4. They went 2-2 in those games. Yeah.
So they were only easy teams, you're saying?
Yeah. They were only underdogs like 10 times. And they were only road dogs. I mean, that's 4 times.
A good and important piece of context for that run, because it was, as you pointed out, 28 games is a lot, but still 10 times to win as the underdog without your best player is still crazy. Like even when we factor and adjust that, it's still crazy.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's tough to kind of figure out. Most of us over to action. We're not betting this game because of all those dynamics. It's like, okay, do you fade the narrative, which is that they need the Jaws out, or do you fade the fade of the narrative, which is that, but they were really good without Ja, or do you fade the fade of the fade of the fade? Like we're in a logic loop, and we're all.
Where are you at with this Warriors team, though? I can't figure out whether I think they're great or not. I think it comes down to Jordan Poole, who I put this out on Twitter the other day, has 5 out of his 8 games this playoffs. He is shooting 60% or better on 12 or more attempts. That's insane.
We judge this Warriors team by the mid 2010s team, and that's not how you should do it.
Right.
It's that they're really, 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 really like, I think they're a great team. I don't think that they're an inevitable team.
Yeah, I mean, they're
just how they were. And that's part of it. I'll also tell you,
if they're a great team, though, Matt. That's the part of this that's so crazy to me. I still can't tell.
I think they're a great team because of how good their defense still is. And I'll also say this: like, I think, like, I will pick the Bucks or Celtics over them in the finals. I will pick the Warriors over anybody else.
You're gonna take them over Phoenix, huh? If they play matchup.
Yeah, I'm taking them over Phoenix. I've been on that for all year, and I can't get off of it now. I haven't seen anything to get me loose.
Here's the one important thing that I think is important for people to understand: the Warriors have out-rebounded the Grizzlies in all 3 games, and they keep getting the offensive boards when they go to that small ball lineup. Remember how Denver was murdered against that because they kept getting second chance points? There's something to that lineup that stretches you out so much, and maybe the long rebounds play a part. I don't know. It's a bunch of factors, but that lineup, for whatever reason, it's so counterintuitive. It goes tiny, and they kill you on the boards.
Yeah, and then Memphis was all like, "Aha!" But we have Brandon Clark, and then the Warriors are like, "What if we also try?" And then that was the end of that conversation. Which is, man, the Wolves had such a good opportunity to win that series, and they just screwed it up. Like I tell you, man, I still think the Wolves should have won that series. They had so many chances, and they just blew it. I would strongly consider making some trades for Minnesota, and I like that team a lot this year. I think they have the core of something. I think they can learn, but God Almighty, like you gotta realize, like you had so many chances to win that series, and you blew all of them. I'm writing a column about this right now, so I was kind of curious about your thoughts on this, and I'm asking you on the spot, so I understand if it takes you a minute. If we had a playoffs MVP, not a finals MVP, but a playoffs MVP that just like went through the beginning of the playoffs through the finals, right? And we're halfway through, so it's kind of like judging it at, January-ish going to the All-Star break. Not even the All-Star break, January. Who would be your finals MVP or your playoff MVP? And mine right now, I think my 1, 2, 3 would be 1, Giannis, 2, Draymond, and I think 3 is probably going to be Luka.
I think you might have got it right. I think that might be my exact order. This last game tilts it in Giannis's favor. Draymond's been so good. I don't think people understand. They've got a great offense because they've got like all these offensive talent, and they have one defensive talent. I mean, give Gary Payton too, but he's hurt. The way he elevates them, they did win one game without him. That maybe hurts his case a little bit. Like they won a second round game with him gone for half of it. Who else would be in the running here if I go through it? Jimmy Butler maybe deserves.
Jimmy's probably 4th.
Jimmy's up there. There. I don't know if I put him ahead of Luka though.
I have a hard time with Embiid. He was great in that first round series, I thought, versus Toronto, but they went longer than they should have. And then obviously he missed time. He missed time, unfortunately, with the first two games. He's been fine since he came back. Good even.
Yeah.
I think Embiid's probably 5th on that list.
I don't think you can go Chris Paul or Devin Booker.
I don't know, man. I had Chris. I think
Chris Paul had the perfect game.
Yeah, like Chris.
He also had like the worst game, the 5-point game, like right before that. He actually has 2, I think, 5-point games in the playoffs. So
yeah, he's 37. That's
yeah, but we're talking about, again, we're not saying he's been bad. We're just talking about
measuring him up versus the other guys. Yeah.
I mean, even 8, like this is the thing about the Suns. Devin Booker's been the MVP of like 3 games. Ayton's been the MVP of a game. Chris Paul's been the MVP of 2 games for them. Like, this is the thing about Phoenix. It's a credit to them. They have lots of guys that can be the best player on their team on any given night.
Yeah.
Golden State, Jordan Poole.
Yeah. No, I had Jordan Poole on the list. I was like, maybe it's Jordan Poole. I thought I had Draymond, and then
who else?
All that. Tatum's probably somewhere on the list. He has, like, outside of the last 2 games, last game really, he's been.
Tatum's definitely on the list. And then, is there anybody for? Can you say John Morant? I don't know.
I don't know.
He was so bad in that first round. Yeah, he was terrible.
Right. Well, no, but that's the thing is, like, I don't know how to parse it because like he was terrible in the first round because they blitzed him, and the second round he's been just insane. Like Ja's been incredible in the second round series. He's been so good.
Yeah, but
defensive coverages, man. They blitzed him in that first round, and now they're switching. It's so funny.
Yeah, we probably went through the list.
Yep. Okay, let's go wrap it up for Locked On Nuggets for the day. Congratulations to Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets on his second MVP. We'll be back with you tomorrow with another episode. Thanks for joining us. Make sure to hit those 5-star reviews on Apple and get us those likes and subscribes on the old YouTube page where you can watch a live show and join the comments in the chat. We record every day this is our new schedule. Is most days we'll be on at 10 a.m. Mountain on YouTube if you always want to catch us. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have yourselves a great week. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On.